Hey, it's Jordan with Status Coup. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's actual living, breathing journalism on CNN. Oh, I can't believe it. I gotta say, this is a historic occasion. Can we, I don't know, pop some champagne or something, Colin? On CNN, an anchor, Jake Tapper, credit where credit is due, actually challenged a corrupt billionaire with bribing government officials and didn't relent, kept challenging him for at least 6 minutes. This is going to take a while, but buckle up because you might not see it again ever. Jake Tapper interviewed Reid Hoffman, the co-founder of LinkedIn, a billionaire, part of PayPal mafia fame, about him donating $10 million to Kamala Harris and then immediately demanding that Kamala Harris as president would fire Federal Trade Commission and anti-monopoly crusader Lina Khan. And Jake Tapper actually challenged Reid Hoffman on this. We're going to play this and comment.
Yeah, so you and other big money donors are giving money to Vice President Harris, suggesting also that she replace the head of the FTC, which impacts policy and the economy. What do you say to somebody who watches this and says, this isn't how American politics should work, rich people getting to buy levels of influence?
Well, I totally agree with not buying levels of influence. I separate my role as a donor and expert. So if you ask me as a donor, I say I'm giving money to Kamala Harris because I think she's the best future president for the U.S., for business, for a bunch of other things. If you ask me as an expert about what kind of Lina Khan is doing and whether I think she is helping or hurting America relative to your anti-merger policies, which are, mostly to bring litigation versus, really solidly grounded in kind of what's going on and what helps American business thrive here and overseas, then I give an expert opinion. But I think donor and expert should be kept separate. And I've never tied the two ever in any conversation anywhere I've ever had.
Before we get to Mr. Tapper's rebuttal, yes, he's such a patriot that he just donates $10 million, almost like charity, with no expectation of anything in return. But then he presses the switch, flips the switch, turns off the donor mode, and then goes to expert mode because he just has a passing interest in federal trade antitrust policy. The two never intertwine. You see how that's how it works. He wants you to believe. Let's hear how Jake actually challenges him.
Right. But I mean, that world doesn't really exist where people say, okay, now I'm talking to Reid Hoffman, the donor, and Reid Hoffman, the guy with political ideas, I'm going to put into the other room. I mean, politicians are human. And if they know that you and Barry Diller and other big donors are giving a lot of cash and want to get rid of Lina Khan from the FTC, they might listen to that more than they would listen to it from somebody in a restaurant.
I will credit Tapper for even challenging him at all. You don't see that on CNN, but I would replace the word politicians are human with politicians are corrupt. Okay? Yes, every human gets tempted, but there's a difference between temptation and accepting the bribes. So we got to work on Jape's descriptors, but let's continue.
Well, this is one of the things where I don't ever show up at the White House saying, I think you should do this. I mean, one of the things that President Biden has said to me every time he's met me is I never asked for anything because all that I'm trying to do is help our leaders be the best governors. Now, if I'm asked as an expert and, for example, shows like this, CNN, say, well, what do you think is the right expert point of view? I would say, well, here's what I think as an expert. And maybe people will listen to me more. Maybe you'll have me on television because I'm a donor. But I definitely myself distinguish between my role as a donor and my role as an expert. And I don't ever, when I'm doing fundraisers or anything else, I never say, I'm only going to do a fundraiser for you if, or, since we're doing this fundraiser right now where I'm raising money for you, I want you to hear my opinion on X. I respond to questions and expertise on them.
So you sit on the board of Microsoft, and that, of course, is a company that has multiple FTC run-ins. Right now, there's an open FTC investigation into whether Microsoft structured one of its deals with your startup, Inflection AI, in order to avoid a government review. That's according to reporting from both CNN and the Wall Street Journal. You're donating millions to Harris while publicly stating you hope she replaces the FTC head who is leading that very investigation. doesn't that create an inherent conflict?
Well, let me talk about it as a venture capitalist.
Well, how about those Yankees? They didn't make a deal at the trade deadline. Can you believe this guy? And here's an obvious question. Why is this not routine in corporate media? We know the answer. But Jake Tapper could be doing this with 9 out of 10 guests he has. He chooses not to. Why is that? But I want to go back to something else. Reid Hoffman, again, a billionaire, says, well, I never directly ask at these fundraisers, or I never directly asked Obama for anything. He doesn't need to directly ask. Obama knows what he wants. He makes it clear in his and his financial advisors' frequent interviews on CNBC and Bloomberg and op-eds and all the other public statements they make on, we believe in this policy, we're against this. They make it clear in their donations to which candidates and their donations to candidates who vote a certain way or vote against certain policies. He doesn't need to specifically say, Vice President Harris, please fire Lina Khan. It's clear what he wants, but he wants to insult your intelligence that the politicians don't know what he wants unless they specifically ask for it. Give me a break. And by the way, the whole conflict of interest that Jake Tapper is rightly asking about, that he serves on the Microsoft board, but is asking for the Lina Khan, who's right now investigating Microsoft's corruption and criminality. There's conflicts of interest 24/7 on cable news. Half the guests have conflicts of interest. Half the pundits are lobbyists. Half the pundits, when we're talking about war and Gaza and Ukraine, sit on defense contractor boards. Never mentioned. But Jake Tapper decided to challenge this conflict of interest. I give him credit, cookie, but how about doing it all the time? Let's hear Mr. Hoffman's ridiculous response.
Because I never talk about these things as a board member. I would say that one of the things that is the theory behind what the FTC does is to say, let's create more competition for large tech companies. But if what you're doing is making acquisitions much more difficult out of the tech industry, because these are small nation companies, like Inflection has no revenue, et cetera, it has a little bit now, but didn't before its commercial deal with Microsoft, then you're creating less incentive for investment, less incentive for creating potential competition, because you're blocking M&A exits. And so, when I speak to these things, I speak more as a venture capitalist. I never speak as a Microsoft board member. Now, even in the Inflection case, it is complicating in a set of things across venture investments that if any time that you're prospectively going to be purchased by one of the large tech companies, it may take, years in review, may have, arbitrarily being challenged or investigated, then that's gonna quell investment, and that's bad for creating new competitors.
But there aren't all these. There aren't like 100 Reid Hoffmans. It's not like one of you is a donor and one of you has opinions on Lina Khan, and one of you is on the board of Microsoft, and one of you is a venture capitalist. You're all the same guy, and I don't think that there's a politician alive that's able to compartmentalize the way you're suggesting they should.
Well, but to be clear, for example, I've never had a conversation with Kamala Harris about this, right? This is all like, I made a comment because it was like, what do you think about Kamala Harris for business? And I said, look, I think she's great, rule of law. It's one of the backgrounds, I think was one of the reasons she's better than Trump. But I do have some things where I, just as an expert, I would say that there would be things that could be improved in a Harris administration and this stuff. And that was as an example. But like, I don't talk to her about that. Now,
no, I never had a direct conversation with Harris about firing the not one, but one of the best appointments President Biden made. I just gave her $10 million and then immediately went on national television and said, fire Lina Khan. But I never told her that directly. So she has no way of knowing because, she doesn't have advisors and a whole media team saying, hey, look what Reid Hoffman just called for, which comes with the implicit, hey, you want more of that money? I need a smoke signal that you're going to take care of business if elected, meaning get rid of this person who's hurting my bottom line and the boards I sit on's bottom line. And by the way, you got to love Jake Tapper's face, frozen while listening to this buffet of bullshit.
Of course, we can have these conversations and you could say, hey, you know, she's not making this distinguish, so let's have this long conversation on CNN about it. And so she might watch our segment, and that's the way she would hear about it, is you talking to me.
Right. You and other donors went after Lina Khan pretty quickly after Biden announced that he was dropping out of the 2024 race. Do you have any concerns that this might hurt the Democratic Party unity that we've seen demonstrate?
You get the point. You get the point. I got to say, it pains me because I much, much prefer criticizing CNN. But credit to Jake Tapper, because this is not what his bosses want. This is not what the parent company of CNN wants. And you're probably not going to see much more of it, to tell you the truth. And I don't think Reid Hoffman is probably going to go back on CNN anytime soon. I want to show you this tweet because it kind of just encapsulates the absurdity of what Reid Hoffman is saying. Take a look at this. This is from Scott Kapoor. Scott Kapoor, managing partner at Anderson Horowitz. He tweets out with very witty sarcasm. Reid Hoffman self-diagnosis with multiple personalities. Reid as a 10 million donor is separate from him as an expert, which is separate from him as a Microsoft and Inflection board member, and is separate from him as a venture capitalist. Never the 2, 3, 4 shall meet. This is a buffet of bullshit. These people are why our country has been raided. These people are responsible for the grand theft that is the last 40 years of neoliberalism. These people are the ones literally buying your politicians so that nothing fundamentally changes. I have to wonder now, Jake Tapper, I double dog dare you, maybe you could start grilling the politicians you have on frequently that accept the bribes. Bravo for grilling the donors buying the government. How about you grill the politicians? Or are you too afraid to lose access? Because we know it's an access game for channels like CNN. And by the way, if you just want to know more, I mean, Reid Hoffman just happens to be flooding money in to try and take out Cori Bush in St. Louis. Right now, she's down in the primary against Wesley Bell, who is a, frankly, neoliberal hack and fraud. Here you have Reid Hoffman's mainstream Democrats PAC has spent $875,000 supporting Wesley Bell. So they're trying to take Cori Bush out. This comes after they spent a hell of a lot of money, Reid Hoffman's mainstream Democrats, to beat Nina Turner in her congressional race. Brown, this is from The Intercept, Chantal Brown would not contend with that disadvantage for too long. Two groups, Democratic Majority for Israel, known as DMFI, and Mainstream Democrats PAC, spent millions pummeling Turner on the airwaves. The two were effectively the same organization, operating out of the same office and employing the same consultants, though Mainstream Democrats claimed a broader mission. This guy, Reid Hoffman, by the way, also poured in a ton of money to save anti-abortion right-wing Democrat Henry Cuellar in Texas in his race against progressive Jessica Cisneros. I don't know if we're going to see this again in our lifetimes, but it sure was refreshing, and I have to give credit where credit is due. Maybe we could show more of it. So the disconnected, mostly boomers watching CNN and MSNBC, although not all boomers are this easily hoodwinked. There's plenty of boomers who are with it, including in our audience, who get the corruption. But maybe the generally older audience of CNN might start shifting their opinions if they know the full details of the wholesale bribery that has captured our government.